Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. Yeah, I brought back my usual intro. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. Who knows what I ought to be doing? Probably ought to be blowing a trumpet right about now to get your attention. But appreciate you joining me once again. And yeah, this podcast is sort of like Ohio State football centric, and for a lot of reasons. Number one of which is Buckeye Nation is huge, and there's a lot of people that like to watch it. And number two, Ohio State's one of the elite programs in the country. So why not devote a show to pretty much what's going on in that program, especially during the spring right now when they're trying to rebuild the offensive line, trying to get the defense going. And my guest this week is a former Ohio State. Well, he was a tight end when he got there, but he left there a tackle, Reid Fragel, part of that 2012 renaissance of the program, brought on quickly by Urban Meyer in his first season, that unbeaten year. But he was at the practice we all got to watch on Saturday, meaning all the members of the media, but also it was Student Appreciation Day at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. And so we got to watch an extended scrimmage once again, and a lot came from that, including maybe how far this team still has to go on the offensive line, but that's to be expected when you had a couple of guys missing. And then number two, they're filling in 3 of the 5 starting spots from a year ago. A lot of guys are paying their dues right now that I think they hope, I'm talking about the coaching staff, hope pays off for them in the fall. But it was not always pretty. Let's just put it that way. But spring practices rarely are. Well, what was cool about that spring practice was when it was done, the students were afforded a little time to get autographs and or seek some attention from the players. And some guys, some folks snuck into there, and like my first little highlight I'm running right here is Cal McCord signing an autograph for a young man who clearly is not a student at Ohio State, or if he is, it's he must be a budding genius. But he signs his autograph and then sends him out on a pass pattern. That had to be a thrill for that young man, who happened to be wearing Jackson Smith and Jigba's number 11 jersey, and Kyle McCord hit him in stride. But he just went from there to Steel Chambers and JT Tuimoloau signing autographs. The two well-known names from the team a year ago, linebacker and defensive end, who promised to have a tremendous season this coming year based on the way they played last year and what Ohio State's got coming back defensively. I mean, there were a lot of guys that paid their dues last year in the first season in the Jim Knowles system, who I think are really going to blossom in the fall. And of course, Travion Henderson's not getting to take part in the spring in terms of contact, but he was out there running around in some other drills. And then after the practice, he also had a posse of fans who wanted his autograph, wanted to get pictures taken with him. And it's just good to see him getting much closer to health. I mean, Dallin Hayden had a really good scrimmage on Saturday. The young man who has stepped up as a freshman last year when they needed him the most at running back. Mayan Williams wasn't around, but I think everybody expects Travion Henderson to step back and be going 100 miles an hour by the time the season starts. And Emeka Egbuka, another guy who's not taking part in the contact portion of spring, but also was out there running around. He too has his legion of fans, and he's just one of those guys. A year ago, people were trying to figure out how to pronounce his name, and even some television guys who should get coaching on that had a little bit of problems with it. But I think everybody knows who Emeka Egbuka is now, and we'll see as it goes along. He had a little bit of a touch-up situation from a procedure done in the offseason, so why push it, right? He and Julian Fleming kind of staying on the sidelines. But a guy who's not staying on the sidelines, and a guy who'd probably like to be out there practicing in the full go stuff more than he is, because he knows he can really help them. But Ohio State's being really careful with, in essence, maybe the best but I don't think there's any doubt he's the best receiver in the country, maybe the best player in the country. Marvin Harrison Jr. Will be coming back for his third season and at Ohio State. And clearly he was the favorite of the autograph seekers on Saturday. These folks were smart. They know who's going to be the most ballyhooed player on this Ohio State football team headed into 2023. And he was patient, took his time with the fans, the young fans, the students for the most part, peers, I guess you could say, from an academic sense, definitely not from an athletic sense. And it was just cool to see these guys, how popular they are with folks, and really, for the most part, how patient they are with their fans. And that was coming off a scrimmage situation where there was some good and some bad on both sides, but especially the offensive line sort of struggled again when Ohio State started throwing blitzes, when the Ohio State defense was allowed to throw blitzes and stunts at them a little bit more than maybe they had earlier in the spring, because, like I said, they're replacing 3 starters on that offensive front. And with that in mind, I want to get straight away to my conversation with Reid Fragel, young man who came in as a highly touted tight end way back at the end of the Jim Tressel era, and then going into his senior year, decided that, hey, the tight end room had gotten pretty full. Why not switch to tackle? Because maybe that's where his possible future playing in the National Football League, maybe that's where it would take him. And he did that in that 2012 season, which we get into that and his observations of practice, things he saw, things he liked, things he didn't like, players who jumped out at him. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation with Reid Fragel. Man, been wanting to get this fellow on for a while. I think I say that a lot, Reid Fragel, but welcome to the Tim May Show.
Thanks so much, Tim, for having me on.
Hey, man, you kept getting in my way at practice the other day. I kept having to yell down in front. What are you? You're still a good solid 6'8", aren't you? What are you? Can
Yeah,
you take it to the hoop? Go ahead.
I don't think I've shrunk yet in my life, but yeah, that was a fun day the other day, getting out there for the first practice of the year for me. So
Yeah. Well,
great to see you.
San Diego State could have used you the other night, in that post
Yeah,
up down there against those guys from UConn, man. But hey, I wanted to get you on because, by the way, Truth in Broadcasting, we're recording this early in the morning, and Reid looks fine, but Tim May's not used to being up at 7 in the morning, except for doing something like this and or interviewing Urban Meyer, who I think gets up at like 5:30. But that's another story, Reid. But I just wanted to get your first impressions of what you saw, because yes, first time you've been there this spring, but what you saw in that Ohio State team, what just jumped out at you?
yeah. I think what jumped out at me was the intensity of the defense. I think that's something, I kind of anticipated going into that practice, or just, spring ball in general. You got a lot of holes to fill in the offensive line, whereas in years past, you've kind of gone into the season knowing what you're going to get. So I was excited to see the offensive line. I knew they're still sorting things out on their end, but with that, you kind of can expect that the defense is going to kind of have the upper hand, so to speak, early on in the spring ball. So
Yeah.
that all held true, I think, and the intensity, especially within the red zone, really showed on the defensive side of things.
As you and I are talking, my producer Megan Gunther is going to start running some video highlights just as a backdrop. You know what I mean, of what happened on Saturday. Some stuff I shot, and it started off with a really nice touchdown pass. These highlights do from Cal McCord to freshman Noah Rogers over in the left corner of the end zone when they were doing some real scrimmaging. And as I reminded people, as this video started, this Tim May Show started today, it's Student Appreciation Day, and I always enjoy that because I always get to go out and stand right behind the offense. Yeah, I'm a student. I'm still learning the game. I'm still a student of the game. But the bottom line is it started out, but boy, the highlights offensively, there were a couple of good runs like by Dallin Hayden and Chip Trainum, but it was just what you just said. Most of the highlights were the defense, especially the defensive front, getting after these guys on a offensive line is replacing 3 starters, and you could tell. And some of those guys weren't even, in the mix on Saturday because they get banged up and stuff. A Lathan Ransom blitz untouched, and then you saw the Kenyatta Jackson highlight video, right? I mean, that young number 97, he's wearing the Bosa number.
Yep.
Coming off the edge, unchecked sometimes, and of course JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer getting after it and stuff. But the defense did hold sway, didn't it?
Yeah, they did. And to your point, though, I mean, it's weird for me as an offensive guy talking about the defense is what
Yeah,
stood out to me. But I think it's just you got to not look past it because it is something you have to address on
yeah,
the offensive line side of things. But I do have faith in Coach Fry. I think they will sort things out. I think you're always going to have those guys step up that maybe in years past were kind of hidden behind the scenes a little bit. So, but yeah, to your point, it was good to see the defense. It was kind of refreshing in a way, just to see the defense be so intense right out the gate and make those plays. But yeah, there were those home run shots that you saw, and Dallin Hayden, I thought he looked amazing. Can't speak highly enough good things about him from Saturday. I think I said about 4 or 5 different times to the people I was with, I was like, he's gonna have a hell of a year this year.
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah,
yeah, he ended up being their running back of record at the end of the year last year, and then they ran out of running backs in the bowl game. And of course, Travion Henderson didn't get into practice in the spring from a full go standpoint, and
right.
Mayan Williams was missing on Saturday, was banged up and stuff. So you got to figure those guys are going to come back. But I wanted to ask you
Sure.
this: did number 15 on the offense, Jelani Thurman, the freshman, this kid's like 6'6", 258, 260, Reid Fragel-esque looking. He jumps out at you, doesn't he? They don't make freshmen like they used to, do they?
Yeah, he's got quite the frame on him, and I'm anxious to see him grow into it and get confident with that size and that frame. And that's just going to come with experience getting out there, just like anything else. So,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, he's an absolute beast.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I asked Ryan Day a practice earlier, matter of fact, a week before, because he jumped out even in that scrimmage. What would you do if it was you and Jelani Thurman 101? He said he'd duck. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, they need to go out and get a guy like Darnell Washington, didn't they, just to kind of match chess pieces. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to, I mean, as you watched last year. Um, did it bother you? What bothered you the most about that football team the last two games of the year? And you just touched on it, man. They had to get the defense. They had to get that esprit de corps back, didn't they, on that defensive side of the ball this spring? And from what you saw in the secondary, for example, do you see progress there?
Yeah, that was one of the things I heard going into that practice was, the DBs are on fire. They're just, guns blazing. Maybe they feel like their backs were against the wall a little bit, so to speak. And I think you saw that a little bit on Saturday. I think,
Yeah,
obviously there were some of those home run shots that hit, which are good to see. It's got to go back and forth.
yeah,
But I think you did see, again, like I said before, that intensity and then the execution this early on the defensive side of things. It was refreshing. I mean, even as an offensive guy, it was good to see because I think, you asked what was the eyesore, so to speak, from last year. I think it was, that spot. So
yeah,
seeing the DB step up, uh, some of the safeties making some plays out there, that's not something I normally watch, but just I think because of last year, it's something you have to pay attention to. So it was good to see them executing inside the red zone, especially. I think that
yeah,
speaks volumes this early on. Anybody can make a big play in an open field, but when you're crammed down there in the red zone and you're making plays and stopping the offense, an offense like Ohio State, nonetheless,
yeah,
this
yeah.
early on it speaks a lot.
Yeah, I thought their corners pretty much stepped up. I mean, you got Denzel Burke coming back and Jordan Hancock, and then you got that number 20, Davis Enigbenosin, the transfer from Ole Miss. He had an interception there
Yeah.
early in the day, but he's just kind of stepped over and hadn't missed a beat. I mean, he does jump out at you a little bit, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. And that was I think somebody said he's got like an IQ of, Albert Einstein or something
Yeah,
out there. He's a smart guy. So
yeah. Yeah, he
um,
is. He's a cool dude to talk to. He's originally from New Jersey, went to Ole Miss, had a Denzel Burke like freshman year. Remember, Denzel Burke had a really good freshman year 2 seasons ago, and then they had a change in defensive coordinators. The guy that actually recruited him, and he decided, well, I'm going to hit the transfer portal, and boom, he's at Ohio State.
yeah.
Your last season at Ohio State was 2012, the first year of the Urban Meyer era. But how many guys would have been in the transfer portal that year if there had been a transfer portal? What do you remember?
Oh man, I remember a lot
Coming out
actually.
of spring, man.
Not oh man, spring. Yeah, coming out of spring, we were still kind of finding ourselves and our identity as a team. We didn't know what the hell was happening, to be honest. But
Yeah,
that's what Coach Meyer had to do. He had to shake things up, coming off a 6-7 year. in 2011, he had to grab that horse by the back of the neck and force it to drink, so to speak. And he's actually used that line before. But that was needed after that year. But I don't know how many guys would have transferred, honestly, because we talked about, that moment came
Yeah,
when all that happened is, who wants to jump ship now, get off now, or, forever hold your peace. That
yeah.
type conversation was had. And we all obviously, wanted to come back and finish this thing out. So I don't know if it would have changed things now. That transfer portal is so easy, it seems like, just to hop in. But we had a special group of guys that year, so I don't know if anybody would
Yeah.
have left.
Yeah, y'all went on suspension that one year, because of the transgressions of others a couple of years earlier, and you did have the freedom to leave if
Right.
if y'all wanted to, but the core stayed there, man. And real quickly, Urban has pointed that 2012 team as the genesis, as the essence of what we're seeing now. You know what I mean? I mean, because if a bunch of guys had jumped ship and gone elsewhere, uh, who knows how it would have retarded the program development, but it definitely would have had an effect, right? But get me back to that sort of those conversations, those meetings you guys had. Could you feel I don't want to get too sappy here, but could you feel a Buckeye pride? You know what I mean? That, hey, we're going to be part of fixing this thing.
Yeah, I get goosebumps even just thinking about it because that was a special year. It was, we weren't playing for anything, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, but man, we loved each other, and it was, the sacred brotherhood, so to speak. It's it might sound cliche, but that is more true than ever for that year. We had a group of guys that were passionate about playing for one another, and we wanted to finish things out right, and we didn't want to just run away from a problem. We want to fix it. We love Ohio State. We knew the year prior we were an embarrassment at 6-7. I think that was the last losing season, and God knows how long. But
Since 1999, it went 6-6. So
yeah,
1988. But
so
yeah,
there's only one way to right that wrong, and I think that was by going undefeated and getting things back on track. So
yeah.
uh, I think that was just one of those years that I'll never forget. No matter how old I get, I think we just have a good group of guys from that year, and still really close with a lot of them to this day.
Hey, real quick, we see experiments in the spring and stuff, often, and
Mhm.
you see them moving guys around to one position to the other. You can see that on the defensive line to a certain extent. You can see it on the offense to a little bit, but like Cade Stover this time a year ago was going to tight end. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
Yep.
after playing linebacker the end of the previous season, uh, a guy named Reid Fragel moved from tight end to tackle. As you look back on that, that was your idea, right?
It was. It was. I was coming off the year where JB Shugarts and Mike Adams were both leaving at the tackle spots. So we had a guy named Jeff Hireman right behind me too, and Jake Stoneburner. So and Nick Van Ed as well. So we had
Yeah.
we had a pretty good tight end room at that time, and um, it was a spot of need. I was about 280 at the time, and Mick Marotti and his training staff put together a plan once I told him I wanted to make the switch, and put about 30 pounds on that off season. It was pretty crazy, but we did it. It was an awesome switch.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things that happened on that 2012 team that paid dividends, right? I mean, I'm not trying to get you brag on yourself, but I mean, even Urban talked about that. That was y'all needed a tackle, and you filled the bill. And are you glad you did that now in hindsight, in retrospect?
Yeah, I think I think we would have been okay with Taylor Decker. He's a pretty decent tackle himself
Yeah.
as a freshman even. So, but for me personally, yeah, I was glad I did it. It was there's always going to be that what if I would stayed at tight end type conversation or thought in my head. But no, I'm glad I did it. It was an incredible year, and I have no regrets at all.
If you had a what if, would the what if be, why didn't I do that the year before? I mean, you know what I mean? As you look back on it,
Yeah,
Reid, I mean, because you got drafted, I think by the Bengals, if I'm not mistaken, but you weren't quite that polished rock, so to speak, right? I mean, just and you kind of went on this journey in the International Football League trying to
yeah.
make it because you definitely had the goods, right? I mean, but do you wish you'd done that, the year before or 3 years earlier or whatever? Just as you look back, you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's always going to be those thoughts. I think it's fun to look back on and wonder what if. But I like how my course played out. Even in the NFL, it was a great 5 years of bounced around, get to see other organizations. Obviously, didn't play out exactly the way I wanted it to, but yeah, if I would have probably started learning how to block going backwards,
Yeah.
2 or 3 years prior, might have helped things out. But no, I'm happy with how things turned out. Honestly, everything happens for a reason, so to speak, and I think just making that switch that senior year and being able to start and go 12-0, I think that was just a special memory in my mind. So I'm glad how things turned out.
Oh, heck yeah, man. I mean, you got your shots, number one, and you could say, you were in the NFL. So that's the point. Hey, Pat, post that. What have you been up to, man? Have you been give people a little bit of background on what you've been up to since then? Since the cheering ended.
Yeah, since I was done, 2017 was my last year. So
Yeah.
right after that, I got into sales and now I do employee benefits for companies over 50 employees. We set up their major medical plans and all that. So I enjoy it. It's a relationship business, and that's what I love. I love people. I love Buckeye Nation, especially. So working with within the Columbus area here, it's been fun for the last 6 years now.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but yeah,
It is amazing. I mean, it is amazing. Buckeye Nation is a real breathing thing, isn't it? I
it
mean,
is.
and I've always been kind of curious about guys who get up and leave, especially in this transfer portal era. I mean, and sometimes they see that the light the light ahead of them is a train and not daylight. You know what I mean? I understand that. The
Right.
tunnel isn't leading them to playing time necessarily. But boy, if you stick it out, I mean, Buckeye Nation does pay you back, right? I mean, in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I mean, even we were on that Buckeye cruise. What was that? A couple weeks back here, but that's just another one of those events. That to your point, it's just having 600 whatever people it was, Buckeye faithful, all on one cruise ship. Raising $4.3 million to a great cause. I don't know of any other schools that are doing anything like that, but that's just a prime example on a huge stage of Buckeye Nation and how strong they can come together and support a great cause. And so, for a business aspect, it's just it correlates directly, and you definitely feel it going into conversations with people. Just being able to talk about Ohio State football, and I'm always amazed at how many people are out there that just remember certain things, or
specifics. Yeah,
even an offensive lineman who played just 1 year. And,
yeah,
but yeah, that's the fun part, and I think that's something even at a young age I knew would come back. It was Greg Gillum. I'll never forget it. I was probably 16, 17 years old at the time, coming down to Ohio State for my first visit, and he's like, there's one thing that's for sure. Football is not a sure thing forever. It's going to come to an end, but there's one thing that's going to be for sure for the rest of your life is Buckeye Nation will always be there. We have the largest active alumni in the country.
yeah.
And at 16 years old, that was kind of my first business decision in my mind. I'm like, you know what? I don't know where this is going to go, but that's got to be worth something. And he was right. That was a good decision on my part, I think.
Yeah, Greg Gillum, man, great guy.
Great guy.
Yeah, it was. I mean, most people can't see the forest for the trees at that age, but you definitely did. Of course, you had a great set of parents, including your mom, who I really enjoyed talking to a few times for some background stories on the Reid Fragel. But by the way, how's she doing?
She's doing great. They're up in Toledo now, and yeah, to your point, I had two great parents to help guide me through that whole process. But
Did they have to leave the state of Michigan because you played? They just went right across the border? Is that what happened?
Yeah, they just had to jump the border real quick.
Yeah, get a little place on the Maumee River.
Yeah.
But hey, Reid, speaking of what you just brought up a minute ago about the money y'all raised on that cruise and stuff, are you stunned that at least players get to parlay now? I mean, get to parlay their name, image, and likeness. And, a lot of them have really parlayed, but it was a long time coming, right? But I'm not saying you pine for the good old days where you could have gone back and redone some of the, reaped some of those grapes, right? Harvested some of those grapes, but it is stunning, isn't it? What's available to players now that wasn't in your day?
It is, but even just talking to some of the younger guys that were on the Buckeye cruise, the current players, Tommy Eichenberg, for example, I got to have a quick little breakfast with them on the cruise, and they just handle themselves like professional athletes. I mean, I don't know if that would have been great back then. Like I said before, I think all things happen for a reason, and I think it would have maybe changed things. Who knows? But I mean, they are treated like semi-professional athletes or professional athletes even. So I think they're starting to handle themselves, and maybe the university's coaching them up to be professional athletes and handle themselves accordingly in some of these financially made decisions in their lives that we weren't used to when I was playing.
Yeah.
I think you're seeing that kind of come out when you talk to these young guys, as they handle themselves like men, like adults and professionals. So
Yeah. Well,
I don't know if I would have liked it or not. I mean, it would have been money, obviously, it would have been great, but living the college days with our scholarship checks of $800, whatever it was, a month, it made things that much better, I think.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, as I've always said too, it came along, laws were passed or signed into being that gave players the rights to enjoy name, image, and likeness
Yeah.
benefits. It wasn't anything the NCAA did.
Right.
The NCAA finally kicked the can so far down the road that somebody else decided, okay, we'll pay the players.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, that's great.
Yeah. They would have dragged that out as long as they could have, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll see where it's going, man. I think
Yeah.
the chaos is kind of settling down a little bit. But the transfer portal is a great example. What we were talking about earlier of somebody whispering in your third uncle's ear, as Urban Meyer would call those guys. Hey, you end up coming cross country. We can get you this, and you've seen that. You've seen it raise its head in recruiting. So we'll
Yep.
see where that's going. I think they've got to get a rope around it eventually, but that will be some major, almost structural changes, philosophical changes for the NCAA to get a hold of. I want to get back to this. As you're watching Saturday, is there
Yeah.
a player or two, like you just said, that, you mentioned Tommy Eichenberg, who's not getting to be in full contact in the spring.
Right.
All he had was broken bones, I think, in both hands at the end of the year. No big biggie, as our favorite Ted Ginn Jr. would have put it. Is there somebody that just jumped out at you that we haven't talked about? I mean, that along that defensive front, or maybe in the linebacker core, that little, CJ Hicks seems to be having a pretty good a spring camp. One of the linebackers trying to make some time while, like, Tommy's not around, et cetera. But is there a player or two that just jumped out at you?
Yeah, I wrote a couple down that just from recalling Saturday. 77.
Wait a minute. You did homework?
Believe it or not, Tim,
You're
I did. I
you're
did
a
some
sweetheart, and
background.
I mean that professionally. Go ahead.
But 77, I think, obviously got to look at 77 every year.
Hager
Remember,
Shabola.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna butcher his last name, but yeah, he jumped out to me as just a big guy on the edge that's raw right now. But I think he's gonna find himself. I loved his attack, I guess you could call it, intensity on the edge, especially
Yeah.
this early on. He's throwing himself, so to speak. He's not holding back. You see some guys that can maybe play hesitant, especially early on like this. But he's makes mistakes just like everybody else does this early on, but he's making them at full speed. He's making them with full intensity. So I love to see that this early on. You don't want to see guys that are playing timid. You want to see a guy that has one speed only, that he's go, go, go. So I saw that out of Tegra, and that was fun to see. I don't know how that's going to shape out at the position.
Yeah.
I know you got Zen, another name I'm going to butcher, Mikulski.
Mikulski. Yeah, he didn't get
Yeah.
to participate Saturday, but yeah.
Yeah, I was looking for him out there, but I don't know how that's going to shape out. But seeing Tegra out there, I could see him being a starter with what I saw from Saturday.
Hey, yeah, real quick before you before you go down your list there, I wanted to ask you about that. When you made that move from tight end to tackle, explain to people the pressure, whether you're left tackle or right tackle, the pressure that brings. You understand what I mean? How tough is it to feel that confidence, like you said, of going 100 miles an hour, even maybe sometimes you don't even know where you're supposed to be going? Go ahead.
Yeah, that was I don't know. I wouldn't call it pressure. It was just something that just needed to be done, I guess, is how you see it at the time. But I think moving from tight end to tackle, you don't really have the time or energy to be worried. You kind of just, I guess that's just how I approached it. It was, this is something I got to do. And, it's either going to work out great or I'm going to fall flat on my face.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, it was a risk I wanted to take. But yeah, it's something that, my dad even coached me up at the youngest age. If you're going to do something, do it hard, do it fast. And I think you got to do that in football and life in general. But yeah, I think anytime you play timid, People can see it, they sense it, especially on the defensive side. They'll attack that. They find the weakness, the chink in the armor, so to speak. So you never want to be that guy that they come after. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think
it helps when you have a guy like Braxton Miller back there, I will say.
yeah.
That changes the defensive attack mode a little bit. So I think
Yeah.
that also helps things.
It's always great to have a fox who can avoid the leg hold traps, you know what I mean, which come
Exactly.
with a new offensive line. And, give me another guy off your list there. Did you write anybody else down?
Yeah, I thought Matthew Jones looked good.
Right guard?
Yep, Dallin Hayden. I thought that was my biggest offensive wow, I guess from the day. Even though he didn't have that many opportunities, so to speak, to make a big run. I just loved his explosiveness. Watching him in some of the drills.
Yeah.
I think that running back core it's going to be another top 2, top 3 backfields in the country again. I think they just look bigger. I don't know how much weight Hayden put on, but my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
looks like a beast.
He looks different, right? Yeah.
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 I wanted to see Mayan Williams out there, but obviously didn't get to see him. But the 3 of them back there, that's gonna be a triple-headed monster. And I'm excited to see the offensive line start hitting some of these plays and get some of these blocks down to really give them a chance to start getting their identity, so to speak, and get some confidence. Because once they do that, this is gonna be a really scary offense.
I was going to ask you real quick. You've gotten to watch this before, but when you see Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, the quarterbacks, and you see just kind of chaos in front of them, and then they're wearing a black jersey, which meant, Kenyatta Jackson coming off the edge just had to go like that, and they were down, or JT Tuimoloau, and it just a tap sack, as I call them. I want to ask you this: How do you think the coaches get any kind of like idea of what they've got until it's really live? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, Kyle McCord's got some shiftiness to him. He can avoid things. Devin Brown definitely can run some and stuff, but of course that's not what football practice is all about at this point, right? But how do coaches make sense of a lot of that chaos we got to watch on Saturday?
Yeah, that's well said. I think it's a jersey scrimmage, right? So you're not really going to see who your guy is until you get out there in that real moment, because it's so hard to replicate that. No matter, you can practice over and over again, but until you're in the shoe with 107,000 fans screaming and yelling around the road in the big house or Penn State, granted you don't have that time to get to those places to see that, but I think the spring game's a good first chance for that. Those first couple games, you really start to feel that and see that, how those guys perform under the lights, so to speak. But yeah, I think it's just, you got to try to replicate that as many ways as possible through practice and, pressures on defense. But I was talking to somebody, on the staff Saturday about that. And I was asking them, who do you think the guy is? And I'm not going to say what they said or who they said, but you don't know who that guy will be until those game environments do happen and come up and see how they perform on the lights. So it was funny hearing you say that and talking with this person on Saturday and hearing their take. And I was like, that's a good point. So
who did you leave there going, hey, that guy can be the quarterback? I mean, if things settle down. I mean, Kyle McCord's been the backup for 2 years to CJ Stroud, Devin Brown's got that. He's got that look about him too. He's got red hair, which kind of sets him apart. Reddish hair.
I thought McCord was, a little bit ahead right now. Just some of the shots I saw him make were incredible. Some of those throws on the sideline, especially right in front of us that you saw. My God, I mean, they were absolute dimes. So Devin Brown's athletic as hell too. I mean, I don't think, we're cutting hairs here, I think, to a degree. But I think McCord, just with his age experience, might have a slight edge right now. Who knows how that plays out, under the lights, like we talked about.
All right. Last thing I'm going to ask you from an observational standpoint. Yeah. Do they have the wherewithal on that offensive front that you saw, the guys you saw play? I mean, the highlights that my friend Megan ran behind us here as we were talking. There's one, the Lathan Ransom blitz to stop the run, came up the edge, came between the left tackle and left guard. The left guard was in a double team with the center on Tyleek Williams or Mike Hall, and the left tackle Josh Fryer, and the tight end. I'm trying to remember, the tight end was in there at the time. but they double teamed the defensive end and left a hole, like the Suez Canal, which Lathan Ransom power boated through and made the play. Those are going to happen, because one of the things they really turned up on Saturday was the previous scrimmage. They weren't really blitzing, you know what I mean? Because it's
Right.
a young offensive front. And Saturday they paid the price. I thought some heads were swimming a little bit. But my question, getting back to my original question, do they have, in your opinion, the wherewithal to have a good to great offensive line from what you saw on Saturday?
I do. I mean, I don't think you're ever going to see an Ohio State team, even in a year like this, where everybody's saying that, they're down in the offensive line position. I think back to what I said earlier, I think you're going to see guys step up eventually. And then we're really early on here. But I think Coach Day and Coach Fry are going to I have no doubt they're going to get them squared away. It's like you said, it's their first real look at blitzes from the defense as a unit. So I did see those things too, especially in the red zone. There were a lot of mistakes, a lot of pressures. But again, that's going to happen. I can speak firsthand, myself, learning a lot of these different plays, making that switch and trying to execute full go for the very first time. You're going to make those mistakes, but you know what? That's the best way you learn. Is I guarantee you those guys look at that film later that day and got reamed for it. And those are moments they're never going to forget. That's just going to make them that much better. So the more times they see those looks and experience those pressures, the better they're going to get. And it's only going to make the defense better when they adjust, iron sharpen iron type thing. So I have no doubt that they're going to be able to figure things out on the offensive line side.
But does chicanery sharpen chicanery? Hey, we'll ask you this real quick. You brought it up as you were talking there. What is the key thing that an offensive line, when you got an offensive line, you're going against a defense like for example, Ohio State with Jim Knowles, the coordinator, he's got all kinds of blitzes and stuff, all kinds of like gambits he can run up front and stuff. What is it that, you go to the line with a play, right? And do you have a certain blocking scheme and the center, let's say, calls out some checks or something, or the quarterback does, and yet they do something happens in front of you that's totally different from what you thought was going to be coming, or the scheme, or the little scheme y'all have called up, you've checked to from a blocking standpoint of, in essence, who's got whom, right? What is the key there to taking that offensive line from good to great from the standpoint of the reaction? You understand what I'm saying? How do you get past? To me, it's like kind of like playing golf, except the ball. I'm talking about the guy you're going to be blocking might be moving. You know what I mean? It's like more like baseball, I guess. You may get a curveball when you expected a fastball, and vice versa. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think like we're talking about, this might have been the first time they were seeing live blitzes. So maybe up to this point, they've just been they've been practicing in t-shirts and stuff and not full go. But I think once you see on paper, it's usually never what you're going to actually get.
Yeah.
So those X's and O's that you've been staring at for the last couple of weeks, they start moving on you a little bit. But over time, us two have these three is kind of how you approach it. And however those three sort out, they stunt, whatever, come off the edge with a blind blitz with the corner coming over late, or safety coming over late, those things are going to happen, and you're going to pick them up as you go. So I think it's just, again, repetition, seeing those things, feeling those things. Those are things that you don't forget when you make the mistake on. I know Coach Meyer especially did not let me forget those things when I made those mistakes, and Coach Warner. But yeah, I think you got to go through those different looks, and you got to have the defense throwing you those unnatural looks, so to speak, and those stunts. And you and your guy next to you got to figure things out and have a chemistry going, which is hard to do right now when you don't really have a set offensive line. You're going to have so many different, and they're rotating in. But over time, you will see, I think, tandems of guys on the left and right side and in the middle, kind of figuring out and gelling and meshing together to sort those things out. But early on, like you said, you're going to have those kind of looks and blitzes that you're not used to, where you're going to have those gashes, so to speak, in the red zone that we saw on Saturday.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask real quick. I'm going to be specific. Like the Lathan Ransom blitz, who came between the guard and the center untouched. Is that, explain to people how the communication goes when you're on the offensive line and you see a safety step up in there. I mean, he presented himself, before the play. Is somebody making a check there? I mean, is it the guard's responsibility? Does it go from the inside out, or does it go from the outside in about, hey, you know what I mean? And what I'm saying here is what you're saying is, hey, you better get that guy. But you know what I mean? But I'm sure it's in some codified form of 30, or
if you're a tackle out there, tight end's never going to be the one to make the call. At least when I was playing, that was never on the tight end to say, hey, rifle, which was our call for, corner hot off the edge.
Yeah.
Get out one more guy. But in general, most of that stuff, especially the heat of the moment, if he doesn't come up as early as he did on the edge there, that's not even communicated. You got to see that. You got to have an eye for that. The tight end and tackle usually have a sense of that going on. But again, I think this early on, probably don't have that down yet, maybe, that communication or that chemistry. But there's either a rifle call back then, I don't know what they call it now. If you do see it before pre-snap, that's made by usually the center or tackle who sees it. But for the most part, you don't want to give away your hand by calling something out if you don't have to.
Right.
But yeah, that was one in particular that I thought to your point, I thought they had enough time to react and call it out, slow things down maybe. But early on, you're going to get those things.
Yeah. Hey, one last quickie. That defensive line, especially, is there a guy that you're expecting from what you just saw Saturday? I mean, like I said, the Kenyatta Jackson kid, number 97.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's playing behind Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau and stuff. But there's a guy that was a freshman last year who clearly went through the Mickey Marotti program over the winter. I mean, he's gotten much bigger. Boy, he is so quick too, though. I mean, and I'm not putting him in your mind, but is there somebody there that just jumped out at you like, wow, I think this guy's going to step up this year?
I think 97 Jackson, I think is the guy. I think it's because I don't know. I can't be alone in this thought, but the last 2 years you're looking for that Bosa to step up.
Yeah.
Right. So you're looking for that next guy off the edge, and Sawyer, he's young. I think he's going to fill in those shoes. But you see 97 out there, and you start getting a little bit excited because you start seeing that, especially through his play, that he could be that next big guy like that. So, again, like there were some mistakes on the offensive side that I could see that caused him to have some big blow up plays, but I think his athleticism, his explosiveness off the edge, I'm excited for his next couple of years here.
Yeah, I was going to say, man, I went back and watched a little bit of the video I shot. And I just went, wow, he got from A to B really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, he ran down a running back on a toss left, which was one of the highlights I think I sent to Megan. On a toss left, he came from the far right side and just ran him down in the backfield. And I'm just going, you don't see that a lot. I mean,
his closing speed was incredible to see, and
that
was, a couple of times I was like, who the hell is that?
Yeah, just think if they'd gotten to Stetson Bennett a couple of 3 times there in that fourth quarter, it would have changed everything, right? Everybody wants to look, and you should look at the secondary. Somebody should not be running wide open. You know what I mean?
I know.
But wow, if the tap sack had been involved. But anyway, that is what it is. Hey, Reid Fragel, man, you know how much I enjoyed covering you when you were at Ohio State. And
it's been great talking, catching up with you, Tim.
Oh, heck yeah, man. And I've enjoyed this, and hope I didn't bore you too much with this early morning call. Great
way to start the
day. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, Reid Fragel on the Tim May Show. And until next week, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you then.